All right, so are you ready to jump into this? Today, we are taking a deep dive into this book, The Obstacle is the Way. It's
Yeah.
all about turning, like those things that trip us up
Right.
into those things that actually end up propelling us forward.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And I get kind of hyped up even thinking about it.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. So you know it's a philosophy that's been around for centuries, right?
Yeah, it has. It's got its roots in Stoicism.
Oh, okay.
And what I find so fascinating about it is that it's not just some, dusty old wisdom.
Right.
It's like incredibly relevant for us today,
Totally.
especially I think in a world that feels increasingly complex
Yeah.
and, well, just full of obstacles.
Yeah, for sure. And it's not just about like external roadblocks. This philosophy, it applies just as much to those internal struggles.
Yes.
Those anxieties, the doubts,
Yeah.
the limiting beliefs we all kind of wrestle with.
That's right. You see, the core idea is that the obstacle itself, it isn't actually the problem.
Okay.
It's our perception of it
I see.
and how we choose to respond to it.
Okay.
That makes all the difference.
That makes me think of those optical illusion pictures
Uh-huh.
where you can see two different images depending on how you're looking at it.
Right.
Could be a vase, could be two faces.
Yeah. I see what you're getting at.
It's like a shift in perspective.
Yes, a shift in perspective. And that's where the brilliance of this philosophy comes in.
Okay.
It gives us this framework,
Right.
a set of tools
Yeah.
to actually change how we see those obstacles
Right.
and use them to our advantage.
And speaking of frameworks, the book outlines 3 key disciplines:
Okay.
perception, action,
Uh-huh.
and
People like it.
3-legged stool for navigating challenges.
Yes, and each leg is essential for that stool to stand strong.
Right.
Perception is about recognizing that our initial reaction to an obstacle is often clouded by emotion.
Yeah.
It's about taking a step back
Mm-hmm.
and seeing the situation clearly,
Okay.
objectively.
Like that saying, don't make any decisions when you're angry.
Yes.
Sometimes we need to pause, let the dust settle,
Right.
and then we can see things more clearly.
Precisely. And once we have that clarity,
Uh-huh.
then comes action.
Okay.
It's not enough to simply change our perspective.
Right.
We have to actually do something about it.
Yeah.
Taking concrete steps, even small ones,
Yeah.
helps us regain a sense of control
Okay.
and starts moving us in the right direction.
So it's like instead of just staring at that mountain we need to climb,
Yeah.
we lace up our boots
Yeah,
and start taking those first steps.
exactly. And even if those first steps are just researching the best climbing routes
Mm-hmm.
or gathering the right gear,
Right.
it's forward momentum.
It's forward momentum. I like that. Okay. And then there's will,
Yes.
which to me sounds like that inner fire,
Yeah.
that grit
Yes.
that helps us keep going even when things get tough.
You've hit the nail on the head.
Thanks.
Will is about cultivating resilience, that inner strength
Okay.
that allows us to persevere through setbacks and challenges.
Right.
It's the recognition that we can't always control what happens to us,
Right.
but we can always control our response.
So it's like being the captain of our own ship,
Uh-huh.
even when we're sailing through a storm.
Yes.
We might not be able to calm the winds or the waves,
Right.
but we can adjust our sails
Uh-huh.
and steer the ship.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks.
Now, you mentioned the Stoics earlier.
Yeah.
It's important to note that this whole turning obstacles upside down idea,
Right.
it's deeply rooted in Stoic philosophy.
Okay.
They believed that adversity, those difficult situations,
Yeah.
are actually opportunities for growth
Okay.
and virtue.
So it's like those weightlifters at the gym.
Uh-huh.
They're intentionally putting stress on their muscles
Yes.
to make them stronger.
Yeah.
The Stoics saw challenges as a way to strengthen our minds and our character.
Right. And speaking of the Stoics,
Yeah.
they developed a technique called negative visualization,
Okay.
which plays a key role in shaping our perception.
Negative visualization.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds a little counterintuitive. Who wants to visualize negative things?
I hear you.
Give me all the positive vibes.
But stick with me on this.
Okay.
The Stoics believed that mentally preparing for potential setbacks
Yeah.
actually reduces their power to derail us.
So it's like prepping for a big presentation. Imagine all the things that could go wrong, right?
Yes.
The projector malfunctions.
Right.
You trip on your way to the podium.
Yeah.
You completely blank on what you were going to say.
Yes. By mentally rehearsing those scenarios, you take away some of their power.
Okay.
It's not about dwelling on negativity,
Right.
but about being prepared.
I see.
So you don't get completely thrown off course if something unexpected happens.
I can definitely see how that would build resilience.
Right.
So if negative visualization helps us with perception, what about action? Did the Stoics have any tricks up their sleeve for taking effective action?
They sure did. One of their key principles was the idea of focusing on what we can control
Okay.
and letting go of what we can't.
Right.
They called this right action.
Oh, okay. I like that. It's
Yeah.
about directing our energy where it matters most.
Exactly.
It's easy to get caught up in worrying about things we have absolutely no power over,
Right.
you know?
Exactly. The Stoics believe that by focusing on what we can influence,
Mm-hmm.
we take back a sense of agency
Yeah.
and actually make progress despite the obstacle.
This is all starting to sound a lot less like passively accepting whatever life throws at us and
Yeah.
more like a call to action, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's about rolling up our sleeves and saying, okay, challenge accepted.
Yeah.
Let's figure this out.
And that brings us back to those three disciplines we mentioned earlier:
Right.
perception,
Yeah.
action.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh, yeah.
they're not separate ideas.
Right.
They're interconnected, working together to help us navigate those inevitable bumps in the road.
It's like a recipe for turning obstacles into opportunities. You need all three ingredients for it to work its magic.
And throughout history, we see countless examples of individuals who embodied this philosophy.
Oh, cool.
From Roman emperors like Marcus Aurelius
Oh.
to modern-day figures like, we'll dive into those inspiring stories a bit later.
I'm already intrigued. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's bring it back to our listener for a second.
Right.
Why should they care about all this ancient wisdom?
Right.
How does this philosophy actually apply to their life?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
The beauty of this philosophy is that it's not just about achieving some lofty goal
Okay.
or avoiding difficulty altogether.
Right.
It's about learning to navigate life's inevitable challenges
Yeah.
with grace,
Mm-hmm.
resilience,
Yeah.
and even a sense of purpose.
So it's like a toolkit for dealing with the messy reality of being human.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that obstacles,
Yeah.
whether internal or external,
Mm-hmm.
they are an inherent part of the human experience.
Yeah.
And that by changing how we perceive them
Uh-huh.
and how we respond to them,
Okay.
we can actually use them to become stronger, wiser, and more capable versions of ourselves.
It almost sounds too good to be true.
I know.
But I'm definitely feeling more and more intrigued, and I'm guessing our listener is too.
I hope so.
In the next part of our deep dive, let's explore some real-world examples
Right.
of how this, like, turning obstacles upside down thing
Right.
has actually played out in history and maybe
Yeah.
even in our own lives.
I'm happy to share some fascinating stories that I think will really bring this philosophy to life. Stories that will hopefully inspire our listener to see their own challenges in a new light.
Sounds like a plan. Stay tuned, folks, because we're just getting warmed up. Welcome back. Still buzzing from that last section. It's pretty cool how a philosophy from, like, ancient times can feel so relevant to our lives today, you know?
It is.
Yeah. So, and we're just getting started. Remember those three disciplines: perception, action.
Yes.
We're going to, like, dig a little deeper into each one
Okay.
using, like, real world examples to see how they actually work in practice.
Yeah, great.
It's like taking this philosophy out for a test drive.
Yeah, let's hit the road.
All right, I'm ready to hit the road.
Okay.
Let's start with perception. It's all about, like, seeing those obstacles clearly, right?
Yes.
Not letting our emotions cloud our judgment. But how do we actually do that?
That's the question.
It's not like we can just, like, flip a switch
Right.
and suddenly become super objective, you know?
Well, it's a practice,
Right.
a skill we develop over time.
Okay.
One technique that the Stoics used was comparing our situation to something much worse.
Okay.
Sounds a bit grim, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
But hear me out.
Okay.
It's about putting things into perspective.
Okay. I'm listening.
All right, so let's say you're stressed out about a deadline at work.
Mm-hmm.
You're feeling overwhelmed, maybe even a bit panicky.
Yep. Been there.
What would the Stoics tell you to do?
I don't know what.
They might ask you to consider
Okay.
someone facing a truly dire situation.
Okay.
Imagine a family who's lost their home in a natural disaster,
Right.
or a refugee fleeing a war-torn country.
Yeah.
Suddenly that deadline at work might not feel quite so daunting.
Wow. Yeah. Like, it helps you zoom out and see the bigger picture.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean that my problems are insignificant,
Right.
but it helps me to, like, reframe them within a broader context.
And that shift in perspective can be incredibly powerful.
Yeah.
It can help us to approach our own challenges with more clarity
Okay.
and a sense of calm.
I like that. Okay, so another powerful technique for shaping our perception is reframing. You
Yeah,
touched on this a little earlier. It's about seeing the opportunity within the obstacle, right?
exactly.
Instead of focusing on what's wrong, we look for what we can learn or how we can grow from the situation.
And a great example of this is the story of John D. Rockefeller.
Oh, okay.
During a major financial panic in the late 1800s,
Mm-hmm.
while many of his competitors were panicking
Right.
and selling off their assets, Rockefeller saw an opportunity.
Wait, so he was actually excited about a financial crisis.
Well, not excited perhaps, but he certainly wasn't paralyzed by fear.
Okay.
He understood that economic downturns,
Yeah.
while challenging,
Right.
often present unique opportunities.
Okay.
In this case, he was able to buy up struggling companies at bargain prices,
Oh, wow.
further solidifying his control over the oil industry.
Okay, that's impressive. He turned a potential disaster into a strategic advantage.
Yes,
It's like those judo masters who use their opponent's force against them.
you got it. That's the power of reframing. Now let's move on to action.
Okay.
Remember, it's not enough to just change our perspective.
Right.
We have to actually do something about it.
Right.
The Stoics believed in taking decisive action, even in the face of uncertainty.
But what if we don't know what to do? What if the obstacle feels so huge and overwhelming that we're just paralyzed by indecision?
Yeah.
I've definitely been there.
That's where the Stoic concept of chunking comes in.
Chunking.
It's about breaking down those big, daunting tasks
Okay.
into smaller, more manageable steps.
Kind of like eating an elephant one bite at a time, right?
Yeah, exactly. Instead of getting overwhelmed by the enormity of the task,
Yeah.
we focus on taking that first step
Okay.
and then the next,
Right.
the next.
So let's say my goal is to write a book.
Okay,
It feels like this huge, insurmountable mountain to climb, you know?
right.
How would I apply chunking to that?
Instead of focusing on the entire book,
Mm-hmm.
you might start by just outlining each chapter.
Okay.
Then you focus on writing one chapter at a time.
Right.
And within each chapter,
Yeah.
you break it down further into sections,
Mm.
or even just a set number of words per day.
That makes so much sense. Right.
Suddenly, it feels so much less overwhelming.
It does.
It's like those long road trips.
Uh-huh.
You don't focus on the entire distance,
Right.
You just focus on getting to the next rest stop.
Yeah.
And then the next, and then
Yeah.
the next.
And before you know it, you've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, exactly. And remember that taking action isn't just about checking things off a to-do list, right?
Yeah.
It's also about, choosing our actions wisely.
Exactly.
That's where the concept of right action comes in.
Yes.
Focusing on what we can control and letting go of what we can't.
And that brings us to the third discipline,
Okay.
will.
Okay.
This is where we tap into our inner strength,
Yeah.
that reservoir of resilience that helps us persevere through challenges.
Right?
The Stoics believed that will is like a muscle
Okay.
that can be strengthened through practice.
So it's not like some people are just born with an iron will
No,
and others are doomed to just crumble under pressure.
no, not at all.
Okay.
Will is something we can cultivate. Okay.
The Stoics recommended practices like self-reflection,
Uh-huh.
meditation,
Mm-hmm.
and even physical challenges to build mental fortitude.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
It's like those athletes who push themselves to their physical limits.
Uh-huh.
They develop this mental toughness
Yes,
that kind of carries over into other areas of their lives.
precisely. And remember that quote we talked about earlier, the one from Epictetus?
Yeah.
There's only one way to happiness, and that is to cease worrying about things which are beyond the power of our will.
Yeah, that's such a powerful reminder.
It is.
It's about accepting what we can't change and focusing our energy on what we can.
And when we do that,
Yeah.
we free ourselves from a lot of unnecessary suffering.
Okay.
We also empower ourselves to take effective action,
Yeah.
even when things get tough.
So it's like a virtuous cycle.
It is.
The more we practice these disciplines,
No.
perception, action, and will,
Yes,
the stronger and more resilient we become.
exactly. And the more resilient we become, the better equipped we are to handle whatever obstacles life throws our way.
This is all starting to make so much sense, but I have to admit, even with all these tools and techniques, I still have those moments of doubt, you know?
Yeah.
What about those times when the obstacles feel truly insurmountable?
Right.
What if we feel like we're just not strong enough to handle it?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And one that we'll explore in more detail in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
We'll look at how the Stoics dealt with those feelings of doubt and despair.
Right.
And we'll discover that even in our darkest moments,
Mm-hmm.
there's always a glimmer of hope.
Okay.
a path forward.
I'm definitely looking forward to unpacking that. But for now,
Okay.
let's take a moment to reflect on what we've covered so far.
All right.
We've talked about the importance of perception, action, and will,
Yes.
and we've seen how these principles can be applied in like real-world situations.
Now remember, this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
There's so much more to explore,
Right.
so many more stories to uncover,
Mm.
and so many more insights to be gained.
Okay, so we're back for this final part of our deep dive into the obstacle is the way.
Right.
You know, we've talked about perception and action
Right, yes.
and even flexing that willpower muscle.
All right.
But what about those times when,
Yeah.
it feels like the mountain is just too high,
Right.
Those moments of doubt, discouragement.
Yeah.
How do we deal with those obstacles?
That's the crux of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because this philosophy isn't about denying the difficulty.
Right.
It's about facing it head on.
Mm-hmm.
The Stoics acknowledge that even with like the best tools,
Yeah.
there will be times when we falter.
Right.
They even had a term for it.
Oh,
Obstacles of the will.
Obstacles of the will. So it's not like the external stuff holding us back,
Right.
but something within ourselves.
Precisely. It's that inner voice that whispers, you're not good enough.
Right.
What's the point?
Right.
This is too hard.
Yeah.
Those insidious doubts
Mm-hmm.
that can sabotage our efforts before we even begin.
Mm. Oh, I know that voice all too well.
I think we all do.
Sometimes it feels like it's on a loudspeaker in my head.
Yeah.
So how did the Stoics deal with that, that internal saboteur?
One of their most powerful tools was the practice of self-awareness.
Okay.
It's about recognizing those negative thought patterns,
Yeah.
those self-defeating beliefs,
Uh-huh.
and challenging them,
Okay.
not just letting them run rampant.
So it's like those thought bubbles in comic books.
Uh-huh.
You see the negative thought pop up,
Yeah.
but instead of letting it control the character,
Right.
you can choose to pop that bubble
Yes.
and replace it with something more empowering.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Thanks.
The Stoics believed that by becoming aware of our thoughts,
Mm-hmm.
we gain the power to choose which ones we let influence our actions.
Mm. It's like being the bouncer at the door of our own minds.
Yes.
We get to decide who gets in
Right.
and who stays out.
Exactly.
I like that. Okay, what about those times when those negative thoughts feel really persistent?
Yeah.
Like they've got VIP access
Right.
and they just won't leave.
That's where the practice of acceptance comes in.
Okay.
It's not about resigning ourselves to defeat,
Right.
but rather about acknowledging the reality of the situation
Okay.
without letting it consume us.
So it's like, okay, I'm feeling scared or doubtful or discouraged right now.
Uh-huh.
I can accept that these feelings are present,
Right.
but I don't have to let them control me.
You've got it.
Yeah.
It's about creating space between our emotions and our actions.
Okay.
The Stoics believed that by accepting the things we cannot change,
Mm-hmm.
we free ourselves to focus on what we can influence.
It's like that serenity prayer, right?
Yes.
Accept the things you cannot change.
Yeah.
The courage to change the things you can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
That's right.
But how do we develop that wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
that ability to discern what we can and cannot control?
It's a lifelong journey,
Yeah.
and one that the Stoics believed required constant self-reflection.
Okay.
They encouraged the practice of journaling,
Mm-hmm.
examining our thoughts and actions,
Mm-hmm.
and learning from our experiences.
So it's like being a scientist conducting experiments on our own lives.
That's a great analogy.
Thanks.
We try things, we observe the results, we make adjustments, and we
Yes.
keep learning and evolving.
Keep learning and evolving. I like that. Okay, so we've talked about the Stoic tools for dealing with these, obstacles of the will,
Yeah.
self-awareness,
Relearning them,
acceptance, and
right.
self-reflection.
Yeah.
But what about those times when we need a little extra boost,
Yeah.
Where can we find inspiration to keep going when the going gets tough?
The Stoics believed that we can draw strength and inspiration
Okay.
from the examples of others who have faced and overcome adversity. They look to historical figures,
Mm-hmm.
philosophers,
Yeah.
and even individuals in their own communities who embodied the virtues of courage,
Okay.
resilience, and wisdom.
That makes me think of all the incredible stories we've touched on in this dip dive, right?
Yes.
People like Marcus Aurelius leading an empire
Mm-hmm.
while grappling with personal struggles.
That's right.
Rockefeller seeing opportunity in the midst of financial panic.
Yes.
Demosthenes overcoming a speech impediment through sheer grit and determination.
These individuals weren't superhuman.
Right.
They face real challenges, setbacks,
Right.
and moments of doubt.
Yeah.
But they chose to respond with courage,
Okay.
resourcefulness,
Yeah.
and an unwavering belief in their ability to overcome those obstacles.
It's like they're handing us a torch and
Yes.
saying, hey, we've been through the fire. We know it's tough,
Well,
but you've got this. Keep going.
and that's the message we want to leave our listener with today.
Yeah.
The path may be challenging. There may be obstacles along the way.
Right.
But you have within you the strength, the resilience, and the wisdom to navigate those challenges
Okay.
and emerge even stronger on the other side.
I love that. So it's about remembering that obstacles aren't stop signs.
Right.
They're detours, opportunities to learn,
Yes.
to grow, and to discover a strength we never even knew we had.
And the next time you encounter an obstacle, remember this.
Yeah, okay.
What stands in your way?
Yeah.
How can you turn it into the way?
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Until next time.